Pleased to welcome back to the program former Vice President Mike Pence. Good morning, Mr. Vice President. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me on.
I was watching Twitter yesterday. I saw you were campaigning in small-town Iowa doing 4th of July parades. Where were you?
We were in Urbandale, which is just suburban Des Moines. I'll tell you, it was a great 4th of July day in the heartland. It was real hot, and the crowd was huge. And I got to tell you, Karen and I just loved being out, celebrating Independence Day, and being with so many friends. It was terrific. We're actually in Sioux Center, Iowa today. We're going to burn up most of the whole week traveling across Iowa, and just really encouraged, almost now a month in from when we announced our campaign for President of the United States. People can get more information, of course, Hugh, at MikePence2024.com, but we're hearing from folks all over Iowa, all over the country, and very, very excited about the opportunity to contend to lead not only this party, but lead this country back to the strength and prosperity that the American people so richly deserve.
Now, Vice President Pence, I want to cover some serious stuff with you, but I want to begin with just sort of a counterfactual. If cocaine had been found in the Trump-Pence West Wing, what would the news cycle look like today?
Unbelievable. It would be wall-to-wall. And frankly, it should be. I mean, if the news accounts I read are right, this was not in the White House complex, right? I mean, you and I know the terrain real well. This was in the residence itself, if I understand. It was in the library in the White House. And I have to tell you, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we ought to know who the leaker was at the Supreme Court who leaked the early version of the Dobbs case. We ought to know in real time who brought and left cocaine on a table in the residence in the White House, but I'm not holding my breath.
No, I've seen some other reporting that's in a workspace in the West Wing. Either way, it would have been 24/7 on every cable channel, and they would be getting leaks from everywhere except your staff, which never leaked. Mr. Vice President, let's get serious. The best question that Brett Baer asked former President Trump is, who would work for you? I'm paraphrasing it, because he ran through everyone that the former president had fired and was upset with. And my question to you is, do you think Mike Pence could staff a better administration than Donald Trump if you succeed in getting the Republican nomination and not the former president?
Well, I got to tell you, we had a town hall on the afternoon of the 4th of July in Boone, Iowa yesterday. The room was packed. And it's one of the things I said to one of the folks that were there. I said, look, one of the things that compels me and my wife Karen to step into this race is because I really do believe that the relationships that we built when I was a conservative leader in the Congress, the relationships I built when I served as governor of Indiana, and the relationships I built as vice president convinced me that not only would I know what to do on day one to restore American strength and prosperity, but I know we could assemble a team, I think better than anybody else in the field, that would turn this country around. And Hugh, you've been at this a long time. You know how administrations work, and it's not only about knowing what to do, it's about being able to assemble a team that can help you get it done. And I really believe in my heart of hearts, with all humility, that because of the experience that we would bring to this, we could assemble a better team than anybody else in the field, a team of experience, a team of character, and a team that would know the conservative principles and policies that will strengthen America at home and abroad.
You know, a lot of Americans would love to know sort of a short list of who's going to be who in a cabinet. And there's always an argument that you cannot promise people jobs. But as former President Trump demonstrated, as you demonstrated in the campaign of 2016, you can put out lists of people who might be in the administration.
Sure.
Will you do that for justices and for maybe cabinet members?
Oh, I think there's no question that making it clear that we're going to continue to appoint judges to our courts at every level that are going to strictly construe the Constitution, that are going to apply the law and not rewrite the law is job one. And I think putting out a list, I think it was one of the bold moves that candidate Donald Trump did in 2016, and then we lived up to that. We added to the list, but they were all men and women of the same caliber and character. And the decisions by the Supreme Court this past week alone give evidence of the fact that we kept faith with that standard. So we'll absolutely do that. And, you know, the last time we talked to you, you suggested the idea of at some point, as if the good Lord and the American people continue to bless this opportunity for our family, giving greater definition to what that team would look like makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I really do believe. I mean, what compels us, the sense of calling Karen and I have for this, as I said here in Iowa yesterday, and we'll say again today, is I really believe with all humility that based on my 20 years of service in the Congress and as a governor and as vice president serving at home and abroad, we would know what to do and who to do it with on day one to turn this country around. And that's what drives us to this campaign.
If you had a middle name, it would probably be Probity. I mean, if we made one up for you, it would be Probity. What do you think ought to what ought to drive selection for cabinet and senior staff members in a White House, in a new administration?
Well, I just think integrity. You're going to appoint people that share your view. You're going to appoint people that share your philosophy, whether it be about the economy, whether it be about values, whether it be about America's place in the world. But then having men and women that will live that out with personal integrity, that they'll assemble a team of character, and then a team that will keep faith with what those policies are is key. Washington, D.C., personnel is policy. I mean, the wreckage and ruin that the Biden administration has wrought on America in 2.5 short years is evidence not only of failed leadership at the top, but failed leadership all across the board of their cabinet. And so having men and women who have integrity not only in their character, but also integrity to the policies that we know will turn this country around. We can get it all back. We can bring it all back and then some, quicker than anybody could possibly imagine. But it's going to take a team of experience and of character and a president with the vision to drive that agenda, build on our highest American ideals.
That brings me, Mr. Vice President, to Janet Yellen's trip to Beijing. Now, one of the crowning achievements of the Trump-Pence years was clarity about the communists in China. And you began that, a series of 5 speeches that included the Attorney General Barr and FBI Director Wray, National Security Advisor O'Brien, and then at the Nixon Library, Secretary of State Pompeo. It was the repudiation of 45 years of a mistake, which was we thought they would evolve towards a free market economy. What do you make of Janet Yellen going after Tony Blinken went? It looks like appeasement to me. What does it look like to Mike Pence?
Appeasement has never worked any time in history. And I just have to tell you, after they floated a Chinese balloon across strategic sites in our country, after they buzzed our aircraft in the Asia Pacific and then, cut off in front of it was literally within days that we learned that the Secretary of State was going hat in hand here was the thing, without even a promise that he was going to meet with Xi. Remember? It was not yet confirmed that even Xi was going to give him an audience. And I got to tell you, they got a term for that over that way. It's called kowtowing.
Yep.
And that's something our administration never did. We never kowtowed to the Chinese. We stood firm with them. We told them how things were going to be, that things were going to change, and that we were going to defend freedom of navigation in the Asia Pacific. We're going to call them out on human rights. We're going to call them out on trade abuses and intellectual property theft. And we imposed $250 billion in tariffs on them. And frankly, this administration, while they haven't gone backwards on those tariffs, they should have been ratcheting it up. And we're going to have a longer conversation someday about what we ought to be doing in our national defense. I mean, it's amazing to me to see Joe Biden spend the first 2 years of this administration essentially cutting our national defense, and even this really recent debt ceiling deal. If they don't work out agreements and pass all their appropriations bill, that's going to be about a 1% cut after inflation in our defense spending at a time that China's floating a new battleship. I'm not surprised that Janet Yellen's heading over there because the borrower's got to talk to the lender, right? I guess that's the attitude. What we ought to do is we ought to be putting our fiscal house in order. We ought to be reforming entitlements for younger Americans. We ought to put ourselves on a trajectory of fiscal solvency, and then we won't have to go hat in hand to the Chinese communists or anybody else. We make America strong on our own.
Last week, Mr. Vice President, Mayor of Miami, Suarez, was on the program. He didn't know what the Uyghurs were. He said he didn't understand my pronunciation, but there's really only one pronunciation, and he's entitled to his own defense. But what do you think about the Uyghurs? Ought Republicans to be talking about genocide that the Trump-Pence administration declared formally on Mike Pompeo's last day as Secretary of State?
Well, look, when you think of essentially what amount to, I guess we'll just say detainment camps that have been assembled by the Chinese communists, rounding up over 1 million Muslim Uyghurs into these camps. It's I think we got to call it the way we see it. I think there is an effort here at ethnic cleansing that's going on in China, but it's just part and parcel of the repression in communist China. I mean, you've had a repression not only of Muslim Uyghurs, but you've had Christian pastors that have been jailed. You've had other religious minorities that have been repressed, and we just got to continue to speak the truth on the world stage about what's happening in China. We also got to speak the truth about the war crimes that are continuing to take place in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine last week, spent a day. I not only got a security briefing from the Ukrainian military and met with President Zelensky, but I walked the streets of Bucha, where in the initial days of the Russian invasion, the soldiers walked down that street and shot down more than 500 men, women, and children of every age, and left their bodies to rot on the sidewalks. And then when the citizens of the town came to the Russians and said, "Can we go collect our loved ones from the streets?" as they came out, they began to shoot many of them as they were collecting their loved ones. There was a mass grave that was built by the church. We laid a wreath last week. I mean, I must tell you that what's going on in Ukraine right now is not just war; it's evil.
The kidnapping of Ukrainian children has not gotten much attention. Did you discuss that with President Zelensky or anyone in Ukraine?
Well, we didn't just discuss it. We actually went by a relief organization that has been set up to bring Ukrainian children back. 19,000 kids have been abducted and hauled off to Russia in the areas after the Russian invasion that are under their control. And I think at the relief organization where we visited, which these are incredible people, I think they said they had returned about 300 of the kids yet, restored them back to their families. The Russians are stonewalling everything. But, I mean, it's just incredible. It's like what I said. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine is not just warfare. It's evil. And frankly, I really left more resolved than ever that it is in our national interest to give the Ukrainian military the support they need to fight and to repel this Russian invasion. I have no doubt that if Vladimir Putin is now facing profound divisions within his own country and his own military, I have no doubt that Vladimir Putin overran Ukraine. It would not be too long, Hugh, before the Russian military crossed the border where we would have to send our fighting men and women to fight against them. So I'm a guy who believes in that old Reagan doctrine. If you're willing to fight the enemies of the United States on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there, so our men and women in uniform don't have to fight them. And I'm going to continue to be a voice for that in this campaign and all across this country.
Let me turn to another Hoosier, fellow Hoosier with you, Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Barrett wrote a concurrence last week on the major questions doctrine that must have made every Hoosier proud and every Notre Dame law grad proud, and I'm sure every Indiana proud. What did you make of her concurrence, and what did you make of the term just concluded?
Well, I must tell you, I haven't gotten to read all of the concurrences and all the majority opinions from last week, but the people of Indiana couldn't be more proud of Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She is a principled, strict constructionist, a jurist, and I know she's having a profound influence. But one of the things I love about her, some of the clips I did read, is she's willing to talk as an everyday American. I mean, she's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
But she's also a devoted mom, devoted wife. She's proud of it. She's proud of her family. She's proud of her pro-life views. But the decisions last week, whether it be moving us toward a colorblind society by ending affirmative action, or whether it was two incredibly important decisions upholding religious liberty in this country, I'm so proud of Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh, and this strong conservative majority that's upholding really the highest ideals and God-given liberties of the American people.
Mr. Vice President, let's talk briefly about the debates. First of all, will you sign the pledge that Chairwoman McDaniel has put forward that you will support the eventual nominee as a precondition of debate appearances?
Yeah, I've made that clear. Look, I started out in politics as a teenager as a Democrat, Hugh. But I know you were already involved in politics back at that time. But it was the voice of Ronald Reagan that drew me to the Republican Party. I mean, it was in his voice I heard the ideals that my combat veteran father, who would have been 94 years old today, and my grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant, taught me to believe in. So I joined the Republican Party. I have supported every Republican nominee for president since I joined the Republican Party in the 1980s, and I'll be supporting the Republican nominee, and especially if it's me.
Now, will you be at the first debate? I know you'll qualify, but will you go if everyone else doesn't go? I mean, will Mike Pence be there regardless?
I'm going because, look, I have a little bit of experience with nationally televised debating, and some people think we did all right. But to me, the thing you got to remember about these debates, and you've been involved with them on the other side of the table, is you're not talking to each other. You're talking to the American people. I wouldn't pass up on the opportunity to talk to the American people about our vision, our experience, our love for this country, for anything. So you better believe it. I'm going to be in Milwaukee. We'll be on that debate stage, and wherever two or more Republican candidates for president are gathered, there I will be also.
Now, the former president is not subtle when he goes after people. How are you going to deal with that? Since you two were joined at the hip for 4 years, and now you're divorced, and he doesn't hesitate to swing at anyone. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, yeah, people ask me all the time. They said, "How do you envision debating Donald Trump?" And I tell them I've debated Donald Trump 1,000 times, just never with the cameras on. We had a close working relationship for 4 years. I'm incredibly proud. Well, some of the candidates for president are criticizing the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I'm proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I'll defend it everywhere I go. But didn't mean the president and I always agreed. I know how to have a good policy debate with the president, and I'd look forward to it. And I sure do hope he comes to every single one of those debates.
Now, you are a very good lawyer, and so when I say the Lochner era marked a bad era in the Supreme Court, when I say the Roe era, which I date from 1973 to last week, it's over, it's done, closed with the repudiation of affirmative action, which is the first case I ever learned because I had, as an undergraduate, Archibald Cox teaching me about Bakke. I have seen the left push back on that decision, and I have seen them argue that legacy admissions are somehow the same. They are not, and I think it's important for people to understand the difference. How do you defend schools that, for example, give an advantage to the children of alumni, but do not and now are forbidden expressly by the court from taking race, ethnicity, and religion into account?
Well, well, first off, let's just celebrate the decision. I may go ahead and borrow your phrase, Hugh, that we're in a new era. I say we've come to a new beginning for life, thanks to that conservative majority that we strengthened with 3 appointments, and to have seen Roe versus Wade sent to the ash heap of history where it belongs is going to be a great source of pride for me the rest of my life. But to your point, I mean, now this court is beginning to demonstrate that they're bringing that philosophy to every decision. And with regard to affirmative action, first and foremost, I think it's a recognition that there was a time, I believe, in this country where we needed to open up the doors of higher education to minorities, particularly African Americans. But that time has passed. And it was even Justice Sandra Day O'Connor who said some 20 years ago that she assumed it would pass after maybe a quarter of a century. It went away quicker. And I think it's a tribute to the incredible accomplishments of African Americans who've demonstrated the ability to compete and to succeed on any campus in this country, and also other minorities. And so I celebrate and welcome that decision greatly as moving us toward a colorblind society, a society that everyone can achieve on the basis of hard work and merit and character, just as Dr. Martin Luther King talked about in that extraordinary speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. But at the end of the day, I do think sorting all of this out. I'm a great champion of our military academies as well. Whether it's a legacy issue at these Ivy League schools, or whether it be the exemption for military academies, it seems to me that there's going to need to be more clarity from the courts about how this goes forward. But I think we've got a court that is committed to our ideal of having a colorblind society, and I couldn't be more proud about that.
Mr. Vice President, you remind me, when you bring up the military academies, that you are a military dad. You've got an active duty son flying fighter pilot stuff, and you've got an active duty son-in-law flying fighter pilot stuff. One made the right choice and went in the Navy. One made the choice and became a Marine. So I'm not sure who the better pilot is, but tell me what you think about this defense budget. They'll tell you. I know they'll tell you, but I hope you never have to arbitrate that debate. This defense budget does not keep pace with inflation. That means things like training missions for fighter pilots get cut. The gasoline gets cut. The number of everything gets cut. Do you hope they plus that up?
Hugh Hewitt, you're the only person in the country talking about it, maybe other than me. But the Biden administration has been cutting back on our defense spending at a time that the world is becoming more dangerous by the day. I mean, we have members even in my own party that are talking about it, kind of walking away from America's leadership in the world as war rages in Eastern Europe. I mean, we've spent 3% of our defense budget in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are fighting and now making progress against this unconscionable Russian invasion. But the truth of the matter is that the core of that anxiety is, I think the American people know that we are not resupplying the arsenal of democracy. We are not building a military fitted for the new challenges in the balance of the 21st century. There's real cost to all of this. And as you say, as the father of a Marine, the father-in-law of a naval aviator, I got to tell you, we got to stand by our men and women in uniform, and I think job one of the next Republican president is not just to catch up on the cuts that are being precipitated by the Biden administration, but literally to engage the American people in rebuilding a military, or let me say it better, building a military fitted to the challenges in the world of the 21st century. We are not there. We don't have that vision. But if I have the privilege of being president of the United States, we'll build a military that from the Asia Pacific to the wider world, to the Middle East, to Europe, will be fitted to the times, and we'll have peace through strength.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, last question. Last week I drove down to New Hampshire to see Nikki Haley. Did a fabulous job. Morgan Ortega's running a town hall. When you're in New Hampshire, I hope you let me know so I can come down and sit in the bleacher seats and watch from the back of the room. But it's a talented field. You've got, Governor Christie, Governor DeSantis, you've got Nikki Haley, you've got Senator Scott, and you have the former president. How do any of you, as John Ellis said yesterday, loosen the former president's grip on his 55 to 60% of the Republican base?
Well, I just think, look, I have great confidence in Republican primary voters. Whether it's, I'll head out in a few minutes here in Sioux Center, Iowa. We'll be in Lamar's. We'll be dropping off at the Blue Bunny there. We're going small town to small town. I'm going to visit all 99 counties here in Iowa, and we're going to do the same in New Hampshire. And I think it's, the great thing about this process is the American people have a chance to take a fresh look at all of the candidates, and I have every confidence the people of this country, and particularly Republican primary voters, are going to choose the right standard bearer for this time. I've said before, nobody could have defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 other than Donald Trump. Republican primary voters knew that. As you know, I actually endorsed a different candidate in the Indiana primary in 2016, but I was proud to campaign with him, proud to serve with him for 4 years. We had a falling out at the end. We still have a profound difference of opinion on what the Constitution required of me that day. But I'm proud of that record, and I have every confidence that Republican primary voters are going to choose wisely once again. We're going to have the right standard bearer, and we're not only going to lead to victory in the White House in 2024. We're going to win the White House. We're going to win the Senate. We're going to have a wider majority in the House of Representatives, state houses around the country. and we're going to bring America back.
Hey, Mr. Vice President, do you have time for one more bonus question? You just reminded me of this. When you get to the White House, if you got the new majority in the Senate and the House, you get one big swing every year with reconciliation. I mean, one really substantive thing. The tax code has not been changed from the Trump-Pence reform. What's the big swing that Mike Pence would take in reconciliation in 2025?
Well, I think the first thing you got to recognize, and nobody's talking about it either, is that the Trump-Pence tax cuts go away in 2025.
Oh,
unless they're extended. So you got to make those permanent. You got to hit the accelerator on that. And that's the other reason why I tell people. I said this yesterday in Boone, Iowa. I said, look, it's going to be important that we choose a standard bearer that will also bring the House and Senate with them, because that extraordinary record of accomplishment in those first 2 years of the Trump-Pence administration was because we had majorities in the House and Senate. We used, as you just said, very insightfully, we used reconciliation to pass the largest tax cuts and tax reform in history. I mean, to get the economy turned around, we should go farther on tax cuts. But people need to understand that what's going to be on the ballot in 2024 is those tax cuts. And if we don't elect a Republican president and a House and Senate under the Republican banner, that you're going to see a tax increase at the end of 2025, which is exactly what the Democrats are angling for.
I did not know that, and that's why I like to talk to the candidates. Mr. Vice President, have a great day at the Blue Bunny, wherever that is, and come back early and often.
Thank you, Hugh. Great to be with you always.
Good to talk to you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.